21 meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second? Mr. Killian, Alder Killian. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. So item number 2 on our agenda, discussion and possible action on appointment of city's poet laureate. Ms. Broderick, do you have any extra information for us?
Basically, that this is coming to us from the Arts Commission for an official adoption. The resolution is needed from a standing committee, and ED is, as I understand it, the kind of parent committee to the Arts Commission. Dawn Anderson has already been named Wausau's first poet laureate and has participated in a number of events. And naming a poet laureate for our city, I think that this was a nice little tidbit, puts us in an echelon of fewer than a dozen other Wisconsin cities. So really nice recognition for our community. So yeah, we just need to officially adopt the resolution for this to make it official.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I'll move to officially appoint the poet laureate.
Okay, a second. Alder Killian. Any discussion? All right, motion to approve, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Dawn Anderson will be our official poet laureate. That's exciting. Number 3 on our agenda, discussion and possible action on the Blinker Phase 3 Fourth Amendment. Ms. Broderick.
Yes, so this is amending the commencement and completion dates for the agreement. The original the most recent commencement date was in May of this year, and I think completion was supposed to be by December 2022. This amendment reflects the developer's need for more time due to supply chain issue and construction costs, and so the new commencement date is June 1st, 2022, and completion date is December 31, 2024. We just need a motion to allow the later timeline for this agreement.
I'll move to approve the new timeline.
Okay, second. Alder Killian, second. Thank you. Any discussion or additional questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, the 4th item on the agenda is presentations, discussion, and possible action and responses to RFP for Westside Battery. So we have 2 presentations tonight, one from Gorman and one from Waz. We'll go ahead and start with the Gorman presentation. I don't know if you want to do any introductions, Ms. Broderick?
Sure, I can say we, as you mentioned, we received 2 responses to the Westside Battery RFP. Gorman is proposing, I'll let Gorman and Waz speak for themselves. And I know Trent is here from Gorman, and you can take it away. Come up to the podium, if you will, so we can have it recorded.
I just want to make sure Waz didn't want to go first.
And Waz folks, you would prefer to go second, is that correct? Okay,
Great. I just want to make sure.
yeah.
And the remote is up there for you. Okay.
Wonderful, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry. All right. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Trent Claiborne. I'm the Wisconsin Market Development Manager for Gorman & Company, LLC. I'm here today to present our proposal for the city's Westside Battery RFP, which is entitled Westside Battery Lofts.
And it's not going to. I can also advance it if you'd like me to.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm not sure
just
it's
do
working. So, for this site, we are proposing a 50-unit affordable housing development. This property will include 16 one-bedroom units, 24 two-bedroom units, and 10 30-bedroom units, all of which will be restricted to households with incomes under the 60% of Marathon County's area median income. 20% of the units would be set aside for households with incomes under the 30% AMI, 40% under the 50% AMI, and 40% under the 60% AMI. Let's see, we are offering the city $100,000 for the parcel contingent upon an environmental investigation and also contingent upon us receiving tax credits that we will apply for in December and hear back about in April. We anticipate that this project will generate roughly $2.23 million of annual tax base for the city of Wausau, a considerable upgrade from the status quo where it's at right now. And so I'd like to briefly address the need for affordable housing in the city of Wausau. So straight from the city of Wausau's comprehensive plan that was done in 2017, it states that a greater number of affordable housing units for individuals and families is needed in the community, as well as smaller, more dense units and mixed-use units, particularly near downtown. And I think that this proposal is, in direct response to this need. A deeper investigation revealed, and the census tract that this site is located in is Marathon County Census Tract number 1. And the stated rental vacancy rate for this census tract, which encapsulates the kind of core downtown area, and that little piece you can see that's just east of the river, or just west of the river, is 0%, and it has been for the last 3 years. Of course, it's not actually that there are 0 rentals available. There's a margin of error there, but it's just showing that this particular market is extremely tight, and that there isn't a lot of turnover in the rental housing that's available there. And it also showed that 54% of rental households in the census tract are rent burdened, which means that they spend more than 30% of their gross income on rent. So what this kind of shows is that there's a dire need for affordable housing in Wausau in general, and especially in the census tract, for rental housing of all sorts along the income spectrum, but especially on the lower end, to kind of meet people of these lower incomes. Next, please. Thank you. So here's an example of our unit mix. So 50 units, as I mentioned, it's going to include 16 one-bedrooms, 24 two-bedrooms, and 10 three-bedrooms. And you can see all the monthly rents kind of listed to the right. I won't list them all ad nauseum, but you can kind of see that there's only one unit that's over $1,000, and more than likely we would try and kind of redistribute that to a different category such that, maybe it would be a voucher unit or something where we could actually have that subsidized with rental assistance to get another lower income household in that unit. But again, 20% of the units will be for households at 30% area median income or under, 40%, above that but under 50%, and 40% more above 50 but below 60. And that's kind of more of this core like workforce housing that you might hear about. And so here's our projected sources and uses. So we anticipate applying for a competitive tax credit allocation under the state 4% program. So this project in particular is special because in this last QAP that was released by WIDA last year, they have a special set aside for small urban areas. And these include, a lot of cities like Wausau, Stevens Point, Wisconsin Rapids, they generally speaking don't score well enough to get 9% tax credit allocations, and also don't have high enough rent structures to even necessarily support those sort of projects. But so in this special set aside and in a qualified census tract like the Westside Battery site is, it allows us to generate 63% of the project costs under this special set aside that very well may not be available next year. They've already started kind of tightening down on this set aside even from last year to this year in a couple of the different ways that you're able to generate credits. It was even more lucrative last year, and it's becoming slightly less lucrative this year because they took away one of the multipliers. But you're still able to generate significantly more equity under this new program than you're able to under the general 9% program. Under the general 9% program, usually you're able to cover 55% of your project costs. But in this case, we'd be able to generate 63%. And because we're applying under this special set-aside, we're also able to access and apply for National Housing Trust funds of up to $500,000, which you can see under the permanent loan row. And again, that's not available in any of the other set-asides. Usually it's only available in the supportive housing set-asides or more restrictive housing tax credit set-asides. But again, this year is special, and this project would be eligible for that. The Westside Battery site is also scores very well for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago's Affordable Housing Fund because it would be conveyed to us by the city. We get points for that. It also contains vacant commercial space and is considered blighted and contaminated, and we would also get extra points for that. So it scores really well for that program and would almost certainly get an award. And that leaves us with the gap financing portion that is roughly just under 12% of the entire project cost. And we'd anticipate, if we are moving forward with this proposal and we are chosen, that in conjunction with city staff, we'd apply for neighborhood investment funds through the state, later this month to try and cover actually that entire piece. But there are a number of other options available to finance this piece of the project. The West Side Battery site is in an active tax increment district. The city has home partnership investment funds, among some other things that are floating around right now, given the COVID pandemic and the emphasis on affordable housing. Next. And so briefly, we can go over the timeline of this projected project. So on October 14th, we submitted the RFP proposal, and hopefully in the next week, we'll hear back from the city about the response for the proposal. And we'd be looking to submit our low-income housing tax credit application in early December, and we'd hear back in late April. And right away, we'd hit the ground running, kind of assembling our sources, our financial sources for this project. And we'd hope to kind of have that done by Thanksgiving. And then we'd be kind of closing the deal with the bank or our primary lenders in WIDA, and we'd hope to break ground, in the spring of 2023. Construction would take roughly 14 months, and at the end of June, early July 2024, we'd have a grand opening. Next. So here's a rendering of the project, and this is kind of like, I guess if you're looking kind of to the left would be Stewart Avenue, or the kind of street that's running left to right is Stewart, and kind of from the left, the lower left to the upper right would be First Avenue. And this is it. I think our architect did a wonderful job, and I really like the rendering. But yeah, and next. So the development's going to have 52 underground parking spots, or projected 52 underground parking spots. So there are 50 units, so we'll have a 1-to-1 ratio for units to underground parking spots, and then there'll be 2 spaces available for a maintenance technician, on-site property manager. And it's also worth noting that we've contacted the owner of the parcel across the street, kind of that triangular portion, to explore other options for further parking. Because ideally, we'd like to open up 25 more parking spots to have a 1.5 parking ratio and allow like some of the 3-bedroom townhomes to have more than 1 parking spot, and some of the 2-bedrooms. So, next. And here's just kind of a general layout of the space. So the first floor is primarily these 3-bedroom townhomes on the west side of the property. So those will take up a footprint on the first and the second floor, kind of going along the railroad tracks. And also on the first floor, we have a community room space, a fitness center, and a community service facility. So as part of our tax credit application to WIDA, because this property will be located in a qualified census tract, we get 5 extra points for providing an employment-based community service facility. So it'd be teaming up with a nonprofit, probably Lutheran Social Services, who will have an office here that's available to the public, but also there primarily for the tenants to access employment services. And that's the primary purpose of that. And then there'll also be a couple more units across from the townhomes that have some nice river views. The next. And so the next few slides are just the second, third, and fourth floor layouts. But again, so several units with nice river views. And the fourth floor, that kind of piece that's on the eastern end of the property, we kind of took that out, and that space could be some sort of rooftop feature that would overlook the river or across the downtown. But yeah, otherwise the western portion is all units. So, thank you.
So wonderful. Do we have, does the committee have any questions? No? Alder Killian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of the neighborhood investment funds, how soon did you say you may be able to determine whether those will be in play?
So the application is due on November 11th, and we're supposed to hear back. I think the deadline to hear back is early December. They're going to have a really quick turnaround time.
And you're thinking now that that could cover the almost 1.7 million in the gap financing, if possibly a best-case scenario?
Yeah, in a best-case scenario, absolutely. That'll be the ask.
And let's take it down to a less than ideal scenario where we're looking at the gap financing. I think TIF was mentioned. Were you considering then a loan, a standard loan? It wouldn't be a forgivable loan, is that correct?
Yeah, so how I'd kind of envisioned the gap financing component would probably be made up of a mixture of TIF, a home investment loan, and WIDA subordinate debt. So we're allowed to borrow WIDA subordinate debt on a 1 to 10 basis for a state 4% project. So that would, which again, that would be through the State Housing Finance Agency. And we'd pay principal and interest on that throughout the life of the loan, on top of the Housing Trust Fund. But again, the other components would more than likely need to be tax increment financing and home investment partnership loan.
Thank you. And then in terms of the size on that parcel and the fact that it's on a one-way street there on First Avenue, what challenges, if any, do you anticipate there, and how might those be addressed?
You mean in the construction phase?
Well,
The
just in
development
terms
phase?
of the density of what you're proposing in that lot there, do you consider that to be problematic in any way?
Not necessarily. I think we've had a lot of success with infill development, like downtown infill development in several other cities. In the RFP proposal, we included several different examples where we have similar parking ratios, sometimes even worse. This development is located next to 2 main arteries for the bus lines, and hopefully the idea would be is that tenants would utilize that as much as possible, and hopefully a lot of those 1-bedroom units and maybe even some of the 2-bedroom units wouldn't require automobiles. But I think that we've had a lot of success with this sort of density. And originally, actually, if you do look at the RFP proposal, it was originally slated for, we had originally proposed 55 units, and we did take it down to 50, you know, primarily out of consideration of that parking aspect. We wanted to make sure that, you know, each unit had at least one underground parking space. And that's why we've also made the effort to reach out to the owner of the adjacent parcel to see what other sort of sources we can tap into for parking.
Great, thank you. And then one last question on the rates, the example rates that you provided, would those be essentially permanent? They won't be phased out after a certain period of time?
Yeah, so we would sign or put in place a 30-year land use restriction agreement that would maintain the property's affordability for 30 years. So that is, the rents are subject to annual increases put forward by WIDA. So it depends on, you know, a number of different factors, but every year WIDA releases new rent limits to kind of show like the annual increase in rents that you can have. Usually they have the rents increasing at like 2% per year, I think is pretty standard, but it also depends on the market in the county.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Alder Estes.
Thank you. Now, I see we did not agendize closed session for deliberation on these proposals, so we'll, I guess, vet them in open, but I think if there is a push for the city to partner on this project, if it's selected, I would want us to seriously look at, rather than TID financing exclusively on whatever our ask portion might be, a mixture of TID and ARPA, or perhaps ARPA. Only because if this is a tax credit project by law, tax credit projects pay property tax at a rate of about 30% of what a market rate building would. And so we would not generate enough new increment to pay off TID debt sufficiently to satisfy the taxpayer if there was a TID investment made onto a project like this. So I think that we have other fund sources that we should and can consider, and we should not only look down the tunnel of tax increment financing on a project of this nature. Thank you.
And- Oh, sorry, could I, or I guess
Go
just
ahead.
respond quickly to that? So I did do a little bit of an analysis, even with, obviously, you know, I'd put up that the permanent loan was like roughly just over $2 million. And that is reflective, I mean, usually if you had a 50-unit development in Madison, that would be like $6 million, just because the rent structure is lower. But I had calculated some sort of a tax increment finance generation over the 15-year period at that tax level, and it had generated somewhere in the neighborhood of like a $725,000 loan. Because what we're able to do is, I guess we have our financial pro forma, and we're able to back into kind of WIDA, if we utilize WIDA financing for the tax credit development, which we will, they're able to loan us 90% of the net present value of tax revenue over the 15-year period. It would equal roughly $725,000.
Right, but my point is that if we were to invest TID funds in a project like this versus a market rate project, it will take us 3 times as long to collect the investment back in terms of return on investment income from actual property tax. So not that that's a bad thing, but I think that there's other investment vehicles at our disposal, partially given the caveats that ARPA can be used for. And, you know, rather than look at exclusively TID, I think we need to look at maybe a hybrid or an alternative approach.
Oh, absolutely. And
all I'm saying.
ARPA's absolutely wonderful for this sort of thing. I just wanted, I know that a lot of affordable housing developments have kind of over-leveraged their tax increment financing. I just wanted to assure the committee that that wouldn't be the case here if it did come to utilizing any sort of tax increment financing.
Okay?
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just also wanted to note, to Alder Rasmussen's point, because I'm still kind of learning this agenda process, I did forget to miss agendizing closed session. So if we want to, we can agendize it at a later meeting. I did look at the council chamber calendar already when I realized that, and we do have November 10th available if needed. So just wanted to make the committee aware of that.
So Ms. Roderick, the next presenter?
Yes, so Chuck Gadorsey is here from Wausau Opportunity Zone to present on their proposal. Thank you.
I'm gonna just put these illustrations down here and keep it view a little bit better, perhaps some other way, but they're basically, and I'll go to the mic, they're basically illustrations of.
You want me to help you, Chuck? I can hold this.
No.
I can be Vanna.
I'll come to it later, and then you can hold them. But thank you. But they're basically illustrations of a 4-story building, if you would, and how that would look in terms of blocking what we see as our view. So thank you, Lisa. I'm here on behalf of Wausau Opportunity Zone, and I have with me Dave Ekman and Jeff Stubbe, who are members of the board, Jim McIntyre and Gary Friels are other members. I don't believe Mark Craig has made it. So first of all, let me start by saying that we basically focus, if you would, on the site, in the use of the site. It's being proposed at a 4-story building, go here, and it really doesn't matter if it's an office building, which is permitted in this zoning, or whether it's an apartment complex, and it really doesn't matter if that apartment complex is low income or affordable, whether it's workforce or whether it's market rate. What I really would like to focus on, hopefully, is what kind of opportunity we have in terms of creating a view line, if you would, to our downtown. And also that I think every community knows that we need more housing, whether it be in these realms, but actually in all sectors. So, and hopefully, in what we're doing in our downtown will present plenty of opportunity, whether it be on the North Riverfront, the South Riverfront, or whether it be in the mall area. So I kind of want to look at this, at least the way I put this together, as somewhat of a test, if you would, of our vision, which we have collectively developed over the last several months, and how we are currently, if you would, executing on that vision. Just 18 months ago, the city, you folks, and the whole cross-section of industry, government, education, public and private sectors, through the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership, created a master plan. And that master plan targeted the river life, the revitalization of our downtown as a key element to our success moving forward as a community. A very important element of that vision is to create a sense of arrival into our downtown or our central business district. It was thought that maybe we could create that sense of arrival on the corner of Washington and First. But I think over time we've realized that that sense of arrival can happen a whole lot sooner than that on 4th Avenue or 5th Avenue as we look at our near west side. And this vision of creating this critical sense of arrival was repeatedly expressed in what we have been calling our playbook. Basically, the TIPS master plan, the South Riverfront master plan done by the neighborhood partners, our Tool Urban Design Transportation Plan. They all talk about creating this panorama, if you would, a view line that you would see our downtown as you approach from the west on Stewart Avenue. And these consultants were not the first to recognize this. If you would turn in your books to Exhibit 6, which is at the back of the book, and I couldn't put the studies in here totally, so I basically listed them chronologically. But anyway, we have incorporated there the West Central District Master Plan. And if you turn to page 2 of that plan, under key view sheds, the Wisconsin River is the most significant feature in the CBD visual landscape. Views to the Wisconsin River should be opened up to the CBD entrances. New developments and rehabilitation of sites adjacent to the Wisconsin River should be planned to provide views to the river from public streets. If you turn to page 4, and under Wisconsin River, the Wisconsin River is a focal point for the central area. Existing and new CBD land uses should be reorientated to address the river. The Wisconsin River should be developed as a community-wide open space with maximum public access and a major asset that will stimulate real estate investment. And below that, under Visitors Gateway entrance, Stewart Avenue and State Highway 52 should be developed as a primary Visitors Gateway entrance to the CBD. The character of this corridor between the interstate and the CBD should be enhanced. The major CBD entrances features should be located on the west side of Washington Street Bridge. The West Side Business District is an important part of the CBD's entrance experience. If you turn a little farther, you'll find a plan done by consultants on the Near West Side Master Plan, November of 2007. And if you turn to page 11, currently, under Wisconsin River frontage, currently there is a limited amount of public access and visual connection to the river from the near west side. And if you turn to page 13, my last comment, the near west side draws its market appeal market appeal and identity from its historic past, its many established businesses, its spectacular Wisconsin river frontage, and its position as a gateway to the downtown Wausau. The revitalization of the near west side will achieve a long-standing goal of linking both sides of the Wisconsin River to create a unified central business district and reinforce the role as a major business, civic, and recreational destination for the city of Wausau, the region, and the state. So I guess as that is the background, so how do we create this link between the east and the west side of the Wisconsin River? How do we create a sense of all the downtown, if you would, not the east side and the west side? How do we achieve this goal of a unified central business district, this sense of arrival? Well, it seems to me that we are being told the obvious, and that is no visual barriers. Even though the building is a 4-story building or 3-story building on this site, it totally destroys what we are envisioning. We depict that if you would, in the third board, and we can hold it up, as to how a 4-story building would block our view line. Also, if you look at Exhibit 6, and you look at some of the code provisions in this district, I've highlighted some of them, if you would, that relate to maximum front setback, minimum front setback, minimum side setback, maximum height of 18 feet. We talk about a minimum street side yard setback of 10 feet. We talk about the number of units as being a maximum of 36 per acre. This is really designed in this code to be 27 units. And finally, the last part of Exhibit 6. And in those last 2 pages, if I can find my own, it's a report that we did from REI. REI has been serving as our civil engineer on many of our downtown projects. And if you look at what they consider to be the issues with the site and the constructability, Tom highlights them, I believe, very well. He starts talking about building setbacks, encroachment, the encroachment on First Avenue setbacks, the ordinary encroachment on high water marks in our setbacks. He goes on to talk about utility easements. We have a stormwater utility easement that goes across there. And those easements would have to be vacated. We have a 10-inch sanitary line that cuts through the middle of the site. There's a minimum amount of pitch that can be on that sanitary line. We'd have to create a lift station of some sort and go around any structures. That would have to be relocated. The construction of the underground parking is an issue in itself. When you get that close to the street or the railroad, it's going to require that either you close the street or you put in sheet piling, several $100,000 of activity. Proximity to the electrical power transmission lines, we have some very strong transmission lines there done by UPS on the south side. And also the underground parking ingress and egress, which is looked at as coming off of First Street, which will create some issues relative to turning radiuses and relative to safety. Actually, your vehicle is enter out of the parking structure, as I see it, onto the sidewalk before it can see oncoming traffic. So those are some of the issues as to the code, constructability, and the issues that we have with the site. Wausau Opportunity Zone proposal looks to consider an exchange for this important community asset for approximately 20,000 square feet of additional land being needed for the 78-foot street design on 3rd Street, Washington Street, Jackson Street, 2nd Street, being recommended by the city staff, Tool, our consultant, and SISM. Currently, the mall land is assessed for $15 a square foot. The cost to WAS thus far in this project is approximately $4.5 million, and the cost to our community is $2.5 million. So really, to get the pad ready on this site, it's taken $22.43 per square foot. One could argue that the value of the mall land being exchanged is somewhat between $300,000 and $450,000. Our amendment to our purchase and development agreement calls for WAS to dedicate 95,000 square feet of land for the road street purposes. The new design takes it to about 121,000 square feet. I would look to amend the amendment to the purchase contract and put the property on the tax rolls in 2022. We would look to raise the West Side Battery Building in 2022 at our cost and an expected cost of $100,000 to $125,000. We would put $50,000 down in good faith until a land transfer could occur, expected to be mid-2022, pending the final street design. So in closing, I'd like to do it in the same way that I started and kind of revisit, if you would, what our vision is, this test, if you would. A test in believing again in our collective vision, a test in seeing if we are willing to stay the course and raise the bar in our downtown. This property, in my opinion, is a diamond in the rough. No different than the mall, no different than the depot, no different than the powerhouse. It must be used for the benefit of our entire community, and that would be WAS's total focus. So I urge you to kindly advance our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee for Mr. Dorsey? Alder Killian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in terms of the finances on this property and what the city is currently in for, I believe 2 loans essentially totaling $390,000 is what the city was in for. And so I guess one question would be, is WAS willing to pay the city $390,000 for the property?
I think our proposal speaks for itself right now, is that we feel the value of the exchange of the land in the mall is equivalent to the value that the city has put into it. I believe the reason for the city in terms of their acquisition of land on the near the west side has always been for the purpose of creating this kind of public view line. And so putting the cost necessarily of the same amount that was acquired in the land, I think is somewhat relevant, but not totally. I think the value of this property is higher than that, much higher.
Thank you.
Because-
Oh, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Just because, Tom, it's going to serve our community in terms of what we're doing in a multi-million-dollar downtown development. Hundreds of millions of dollars that we can now see from the west side.
Thank you. So I see that in the hard copies here, you'd referenced a couple plans. One of them was the Central Business District plan, I believe, and I think it was from 2000. But the near west side master plan that is referenced here, I think that was 7 years later. And as it points out in that Area 4, I believe that was intended to be gateway development. Now, sure, that was 2007, so they say commercial or retail, and a lot of things may have changed since 2007, but I do believe the intention had been development in the master plan rather than just complete elimination of any development on that property. So I guess I would have a concern about that. And I'd also, to my earlier question, I think have a concern about the finances of the transaction. I think it does matter how far and how much the city is in for. So, I mean, for me personally, I think if WAS was willing to come up with the $390,000 that the city has paid for the property, to me, that would certainly perhaps cause me to revisit some of my other concerns. But thank you.
Yeah, and in response to that, Tom, a lot has transpired. I mean, a tremendous amount has transpired in this community since 2007. And to look at that report strictly in itself, where it said, let's utilize land along this corridor in terms of offices or retail or whatever we can do, there's a much better sense of what this land can mean to the greater Wausau downtown. Secondly, Wausau Opportunity Zone has not been hesitant to invest money in this transaction. And when you look at what they have invested today, probably somewhere in that 4.5 million, they will continue to invest in aspects of this plan that go beyond what we see right now. So that's the partner you have. And so I don't hesitate to say that I think WAS can focus on a redevelopment here that will be valuable, and that they'll continue to reinvest in what we're trying to accomplish in our downtown rehabilitation.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? All the rest of them.
Not a question so much, I guess, but just a couple points of discussion. And I think that we are probably not equipped to make a final decision on either proposal tonight. I think we will end up needing that closed session to have some back and forth on the plan. But I guess just a couple of observations about both plans. We have long talked about that site as needing to have a gateway-type appearance. I believe, based on the rendering that we see from Gorman, that their project is a quality project that offers that feel. I also think that every project that they've done in our area has been a quality project, including the one that's in progress right now. So, I think that site has some challenges. It's hard for me to see that site as a diamond in the rough because it's got site access challenges. It is sitting on an active rail track that has, trains every day. And it is the river as a focal point on that site is substantially below the ground level of that site. And it's at the entrance to the hydro dam. So, there's some serious restrictions there. People can't use that water. They can't access that water. In fact, at that point, that water's a little bit dangerous. So there are some site challenges with that site, whether it was ever developed or not. I certainly can see the aesthetic point of view as far as knocking down West Side Battery and waiting. But that said, I think that we also have to focus on quality projects when they show themselves. And we have talked a lot in this committee about affordable housing, and we've talked about what we need in TID 8 and what we need in downtown is people to live there and people to live near there. And people of all income levels and all means that all need and utilize services. They all buy goods. They all contribute to the local economy. So we've looked at an awful lot of high-density housing along the river. We'll continue to do that on the north and south riverfront as well. And we're doing it on a substantial piece of the mall site. So on all of that right now is renting for market rate. Now we have this missing middle, and we have a shortage at low. And so I think that if we were to choose a site like this, the illustration of the blocked view is a white box. But that building isn't a white box. So when you look at the aesthetics of that building from a skyline approach, if you back up 3 blocks and look at what you see coming in, you see a horizon of quality structures for as far as you can see. You know, from basically, I mean, you can see almost from the eye clinic past the mall to 4th Street. That landscape would not be negatively impacted by this building sitting there. This building looks, you know, as good as anything that we've proposed as far as a 4-unit housing apartment. So, you know, I think that this project could work with other things in the downtown, and I guess I don't see it as a detriment because, you know, the way Stewart Avenue blends into Washington Street, traffic angles around that area and it curves toward Clark's Island and the depot and the mall. And so all of those things, if they're not visible from 5 blocks away, are immediately visible once a person passes this corner. So, you know, I think that all of these things could coexist in a good way. I do think that the points made by REI from an engineering standpoint have merit. You know, if there are sewer lines that run through the middle of the property that we don't know about. I mean, we've just lived that with another project, and that stalled that project. You know, if there are utility easements, if there's setback issues, if there are water table issues with that proximity to public service and with the construction of the underground garage. These all may be things that Gorman, as a proposer, needs to not only know about, but think through and decide if this project is still viable in the face of what these challenges may present. So I don't feel like we're ready to make a decision on either proposal. But I also don't think that development on that site, as proposed by proposer number 1, is necessarily a negative. I think that regardless of what choice we make, there will be a positive outcome. I do think, though, that when we look at the economics of using the land dedication for the downtown streets through the mall projects as a revenue center for this project, or as an offset, that land dedication was already part of the mall deal. When the mall deal standing alone was negotiated and then renegotiated, the value of that land and the value of those streets and that infrastructure being constructed was part of that deal all along, whether West Side Battery was in play or not. And so I think that it's difficult now then to suck that project into West Side Battery. I think the two need to be separate. So, you know, I guess I would like to see us, you know, maybe have some further discussion before we make a decision, because there's merits to both proposals, and I think the REI evaluation does raise some expensive questions for any developer. So I don't feel like we can choose tonight.
And I think you make a good point. I mean, I think we can still potentially meet on the 10th if it works for the committee members, but I would like to have just a little more discussion on the two things publicly. And then, like you said, I mean, maybe Gorman can take that REI project back and then, you know, sort of reevaluate, see if there's any changes. But my thoughts are, I sort of agree with you on that, about the view. And our need for affordable housing is so intense. And even though I noticed the timeline's 2024, so it's a bit farther down the road. So it's not going to like fix things now, but it's impossible to do that. But I was really keen on the presentation. So any other questions or discussion points? Yep.
Thank you. I guess I'm going to, you know, just chime in and say that I really am liking Gorman's presentation. I do have a question for them because we're talking about kind of pulling back for a while. My question to Gorman is, you had a pretty tight timeline. How would us not moving forward quickly affect your timeline in getting your credits or your applications in?
So the application deadline for competitive tax credit allocation is December 10th. And right now, as it was previously alluded to, the site isn't zoned for the density that we are asking for. So we've preemptively submitted a application for planned unit development just about a week ago, I believe. And I think that Liz might need to chime in on this, but I believe that the planning commission date that they would need to take that up on is November 16th, if I'm thinking correctly.
I was trying to find that in my email, actually. I believe that is correct. Yeah, we did talk about, Trent came and introduced himself in my office before this meeting, and I told him that the possibility of November 10th would be, we might need to push it to that, so.
And I
Well,
th-
okay, but okay, so then he would need to go to planning on what? I mean, I have to, because we have to get through council as well, so we are tight. And that's what I want to make sure that you have that in hand.
I can double check right now the planning date and council date as well, but we had contemplated the timeline of this being very, very tight, so let me just find it and I'll let you
Council
know.
meeting after that would be the 23rd. So, I mean, barring a special meeting, we would have something going on every week then
Yeah.
with this project.
I just want to make sure, because the tax credits are really important. That's what's going to
Absolutely.
bring them forward. And I don't want, we did have some issues planning this meeting. It was going to be earlier. We couldn't get, a place to meet. So I just want everybody in the committee to be aware of the tight timelines. And I want to make sure that we know what we're doing
Yeah.
in those tight timelines.
I did just find this in my email, November 16th Plan Commission, November 23rd Common Council is the
Okay,
timeline.
so we would have
planning.
time then to
10th, the 16th and the 23rd.
mull this over until the 10th and then have some discussion both in open and closed. I think that's important. I also think it's important for, some of these considerations to be vetted that were raised by REI to see if any of these are a deal breaker for the project. Because if this all just came to light now, that's huge.
Yeah, and something I also wanted to chime in on that is, obviously, the ideal situation is that we'd go underground with the parking, but in alternative scenarios, we have at grade level parking, a podium style, in which we'd have precast concrete first floor parking, and then units up above.
So 5-story then.
Well, as you notice, on the 4th floor, we currently only have half of a story, so it's possible that we'd still be able to meet the 4-story requirement. And again, we're looking at a few different situations, like also across the way, like if we're able to secure that for parking. But I think that realistically, we might be able to still keep it to 4 stories, but the unit mix might change a little bit. We might have to get a little more creative.
Secondary question,
Sure.
were you envisioning that parking across the street, assuming you can get the site, to be surface parking or some type of a ramp?
It would be surface parking. Yeah,
Okay.
and that's just, and again, it wasn't something we consider to be absolutely necessary for the project, just kind of a cherry on top. It would be nice. So I managed to find the owner of the property and contact them and see if they were open to selling it.
Thank you.
And so then I wonder, would you be able to address those questions if we had a meeting on the 10th of November?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Especially that's, 8 days from now, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. I too just want to say that we have been looking for affordable housing. We've been looking for workforce housing. The state of Wisconsin's been looking for, has been pushing for workforce housing. And our residents have been pushing for that. We need to have, I think, some tax base on here as well, which we will have a little bit. I think that's important. Westside Battery's been kind of there for a long time, and I just think the residents would like to see something happen. And that's about it, but I do agree with Alder Rasmussen about, I don't like using TIF funding if possible for affordable housing due to that, but we do have ARPA funds, and we have talked about in this council about using ARPA funds for affordable housing. So I think that, it kind of all meshes together pretty nicely.
Yeah, and, if I could, I'd also just like to, again, drive the point home that I think, especially for Wausau, just given the analysis that I've done of the tax credit program, I mean, we're looking all over the state, is that this year is particularly good for an area like Wausau to apply for these funds, because the QAP will change again in April, and they had already kind of degraded this set aside, like relative to the benefits that it provided last year. So for all we know, next year it could just be gone. So I guess just wanted to drive that point home, and Yeah, thank you very much for your consideration. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And along the lines of Alder McElhaney, we have used ARPA funds already for low-income housing or affordable housing, so, I mean, it wouldn't be a stretch to do it again, right? Any other comments? Yeah, Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, a couple of things I heard tonight kind of shifted my disposition from when I'd come in the room on these two proposals, and one of them was hearing that the gap financing may be largely composed of non-city dollars. And I think as close to zero as we can get that, the more, I think, the more likely I am to be supportive. So that was great to hear. Also, the rental rates, as everyone's hammered home tonight, I think affordable housing is a critical and urgent need. And, you know, we heard that perhaps we'll see more of that in downtown development, but to date, we are not. Most of these projects, other than Gorman's and the Landmark, I mean, these have been market rate planned development. So I think this is another unique opportunity, and so I think that, you know, there's something about a nice view. We just voted to have a poet laureate, so I mean, without humanities, it's hard to have humanity, but I think there's a deeper priority here when we're talking about the humans in our community, and that's that they have a roof over their house. So I don't think it's going to change the landscape of the downtown developments to move forward on this, but it could certainly change the landscape of our priorities if we don't do it. So if we can get that subsidy of city dollars as close to zero as possible, I think what I've heard tonight does shift my thought process on the way in. And also, as my colleagues have stated about REI's commentary, just making sure that, you know, that we can overcome any real challenges that they've detailed in there. Thank you.
So if it's Alder Rasmussen?
Thank you. Just to clarify, I guess also that that should also mean that overcoming those challenges, if those challenges are valid that REI came up with, shouldn't also include $500,000 for us to relocate a sewer line. So, you know, I mean, it's just, those things sometimes end up built into the project, but those then also basically annihilate our return on investment and then ramp up our costs as well. So, you know, if the infrastructure is there and it's in good repair, you know, we certainly don't want to have to contribute to the removal of utilities.
So if it's the will of the committee, would it be okay with everyone if we reconvene on November 10th to bring this back? Okay, great. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, number 5, update on developments. We're going to look at Riverfront Condo Project, T-Wall, and then Neighborhood Investment Program Fund. Ms.
Yes.
Roderick, thank you.
Thank you. So just wanted to keep everyone apprised of what is going on with some various developments. The River Life condos, I just wanted to let everyone know that we continue to work through a development agreement with Mitch Viget and his team. We just recently, last week, we've had 2 meetings with them and laid out a multi-step process to address soil contamination issues and some engineering concerns. So we have a team meeting with them coming up, I believe, next week to hopefully wrap this up. I know the goal is to get it in December, but we will not back into that. We just are trying very hard to get this done and get these issues worked through. So that's really what I can say about that. We're still working on it. With T-Wall, unless there are questions on that, I can continue with.
I guess the only question I would have on that is that it was I guess, foretold that all of the riverfront sites have environmental challenges. Most of them have soil challenges. Most of them require geopiers and vapor barrier. Is there anything different about this site that's been discovered now other than what we already knew?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think that geo drilling has been done yet. That's actually, I believe, step 2 of our multi-step plan for and I can have my notes right here. One of them, the first step is talking with engineering because there's contemplation about raising the parking lot grade. And then we also need geodrilling to figure out what's underneath or in the contaminated soil, if there's any way that we might be able to use that. So that's the long answer to really say, I am not aware of anything different about this project, but I think there has been a misunderstanding with basically the developer and the city and understanding what has been requested in terms of soil contamination management. So we are now just kind of finally understanding where that came from and working through that. So I think that's been one of the holdups.
So we're not expecting a subsequent ask then and surprises in the terms of the agreement?
No, this came back. The whole reason we've been looking at this again was to amend a commencement and completion date and then get a certified site map for it. Or a certified survey map. So there have been different pieces brought up in the development agreement that weren't kind of on the table before. So that's we're not expecting any different ask really in terms of the monetary commitment from the city, at least at this point. But we have been just working through some issues that really weren't touched on at all in the original development agreement.
Okay, because my first thought would be that with their experience with River Life already, they should certainly be aware of what's all down there and needs to be dealt with down there when you try to build. So, okay, thank you for that.
I guess I'm just trying to understand, the city's not going to do environmental testing, correct?
No, that is REI is going to do that for them.
Okay.
We did I believe, they're doing the geodrilling, REI is doing the geodrilling that will then tell us what type of contamination is down there.
I'm confused. Yeah, I'm confused because this is, how many years? I mean, this is confusing to me.
To the process and everything, is that,
Well, I mean, I guess what's confusing to me is that development agreement was done, gosh, when was that?
Well, it's been months, but I think separate from that, when the city acquired all of those tracts, they were clear on what was, basically the challenges of all those sites were. Those were included in all the RFPs. And so, unless there's some, surprise finding, I guess it surprises me that this is coming up this late in the game. I mean, I think everyone knew about it on the front end. And, same thing that happened with Cherry Tree. I mean, all of a sudden, we're committed to a contract and somebody goes, what? The land is contaminated? I mean, where have people been? Basically, there's no other way to put it. I mean, you can't not, you have to be not paying attention to not know this, because we've talked about this like dozens of times. So, hopefully it gets worked out soon.
I hope so too, definitely. Moving on to another River Life project. With T-Wall, WAS, through Chuck Gadorsey, approached the city about a potential reprioritization of the projects that T-Wall has been looking at in Wausau. And Chuck has very graciously offered to kind of walk us through exactly the timeline of all of this, and then answer any questions that you may have about this reprioritization.
Another book.
Thank you, Liz, and let me step back a little bit and give a little bit more of an update, if you would, to your committee regarding where we are in our revitalization, if you would, of the downtown. And on that front page, I'm just going to highlight some of those, and then we'll talk about what Liz has introduced. First of all, on the street design, we continue to work with Tool and the city administrative team in terms of designing some really nice streets. And so that's kind of how we've gotten to this 78 foot, if you would, right away, and how it accesses, if you would, the different buildings. So we had another, I thought, productive meeting on that today with the Tool team. The pedestrian bridge, as in many of the aspects of our plan, is one that we want to cohesively, if you would, move forward along with other things. And so on the pedestrian bridge itself, we have re-engaged Epstein Ewan Architects as our lead and a consultant with them, which will be Thorson and Tomasetti. That group has done a number of bridges around the world, really, and we feel confident that they're going to give us a very nice design. They're out of Milwaukee, so we're close. The plan there is that we would develop some concepts, about 4 of them. We'll work with the city and others to define that down to 2 and finally to 1. And then we'll put some costs, if you would, specifically to that. We've also engaged in that same plan REI to serve as our civil engineer and provide services along with the city staff. In Hanson, which is an engineering firm that specializes in railroad crossings. And we have a railroad crossing that we have to do, and we think we can do it. In terms of Clark Island, as you know, the chamber has secured a 40-year lease on that facility, and it will be revitalized for our Industry 4.0 program, which will basically serve innovative companies in our educational system, K through 16. The depot has also been purchased by the chamber, finally an asset that has been sitting there for 50 years and not deserving, I think, of its true value as a historic site. The chamber will be renovating that building and turning it into their chamber offices. The Children's Imaginarium has signed a lease with Home Furniture, approximately 13,000 square feet of what would be the west side of the Home building will be segmented off for the Children's Imaginarium. Demolition, as you know, I think went very well, and we continue on our plan for the environmental. We have been working very closely with the Green Team, and that relationship has been very good. We turned in our last reports, if you would, that they were requiring relative to some of our groundwater tests. They were very favorable. And so we are expecting maybe even this week to receive from the Green Team what we have been calling a closure letter. Well, let me put it this way, a letter to proceed, if you would, to our closure plan. So we look forward to having a closure on that site with a cap, which essentially means as we move into our projects, we'll remove the cap and take care of the soils as required by the DNR. So with that, I'd like to just talk a little bit more about our plan, if you would, for selecting a developer for the mall site. When T-Wall Enterprises began showing an interest in Wausau, basically through the RFP on the River Lakes District, at that same time, they expressed an interest in what we were doing on the mall project. They immediately sent us a letter of credit, and or letter of intent. This goes back quite a ways, to purchase Block 4 and to have an option, if you would, on Block 1 as well. The illustrations in your booklet kind of shows a little bit about what the scope of the work is for Block 4. Block 4 is a project of approximately 132 units. It has 21,000 square feet of retail, 138 underground parking stalls. And the possibility of starting, as we were discussing back then, a start in 2024 after the River Life project, knowing that we couldn't push too many market rate apartments or any apartments on the market at any given time. As time transpired over the last 3 months, the mall site has truly gotten to be pad ready a whole lot faster than we expected, specifically because of the timing, if you would, of our DNR acceptance. With that, and as we looked through drafts of the LOI, WAS began to discuss amongst itself, the board, through the mayor's office and and her team, and T-Wall Enterprises, a strategy which would prioritize Block 4 of the mall site for construction in 2022 and River Life then in 2024, just the reverse. That would allow us about 18 to 24 months, if you would, for Block 4 to be occupiable. There would be a lot of positives in this prioritizing of the mall first. Block 4 sets the tone of quality standards for block and projects to come on Block 4, 1 and 2. It corresponds with the utility and the temporary street construction, which will be occurring in 2022. It's a larger project, if you would, of 132 to 140 units, and it embraces our retail elements that we have in the plan on 3rd Street, Jackson Street, and Washington Street. It corresponds with our hopes to receive as much as perhaps $15 million in a grant for the Neighborhood Investment Fund with the state of Wisconsin, which Liz is handling. It also corresponds with the start of construction of the north wall of the home building and the Children's Imaginarium scheduled for opening in November of 2022. What WAS likes about the selection of T-Wall Enterprises is the experience they has specifically in downtown developments such as Green Bay, Middleton, Neenah, and others. This is, if you would, their sweet spot, and we have liked their approach to design and function. As far as our next timeline, WAS and T-Wall Enterprises will be looking to sign a letter of intent within a couple of weeks. For T-Wall Enterprises, they will need to present a development agreement to the city for Block 4 to be reviewed by you and approved. For T-Wall Enterprises, it will mean that they will immediately engage in the design process for the construction so that finally construction could begin in August, September, or October of 2022. Thank you.
So any questions from the committee?
I
Alder
have one.
Rasmussen?
Well, I guess I have, it's a big one. There's nothing wrong with T-Wall being the developer on both projects. It's great that they have that interest, and I've actually been through a couple areas in Madison, and I see that over the summer, they're building like crazy, and what they build looks fantastic. So there's no question about that. But with the approval and selection of T-Wall on the Riverfront project, staff was directed to move forward with the proposed timeline and execute a development agreement on schedule for that project. So if there's a need to flip-flop these things now, somebody from T-Wall is going to have to get back into this committee and in front of the council and request revised dates for that Riverfront project and an elongated timeline in addition to any development agreement they have for Block 4. So, and that needs to happen either at the same time or sooner than later, because, you know, that approval and selection of T-Wall for that Riverfront in response to that RFP is basically done. I mean, they were on board. And now, you know, and we all have talked about the fact that there's no need to develop the entire Riverfront. That land is a you know, limited commodity. There's no need to develop that all overnight. So there's not a problem with waiting even. But somebody is going to need to get in here for approval to switch up that timeline and delay that project, because there were other proposers for that.
And I believe T-Wall Enterprises is fully on board with that.
Okay.
To set those timelines, if you would, for both
Okay.
projects.
Yep.
Yes, I was just going to say, we've been working through basically what that new timeline might look like in terms of the reprioritization of the mall redevelopment site and what T-Wall would need and how the city would work together to ensure a timeline for the Riverfront project.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Alder McElhaney?
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just trying to understand, because I'm a little frustrated with how this happened, and I guess I am frustrated, and because I have not, I have residents asking what the heck is going on. We did this, when was that? Was that last summer? This summer, and we haven't heard anything. It should have, I mean, where is that development agreement for the riverfront? What's been happening with that? That's my question. And number two, I mean, I guess, you know, it isn't, are they coming with another ask?
I see the mayor standing in the wings over there. So we have been working through the development agreement. There was basically a change in ask that kind of caused us to think like maybe this makes more sense to look at the mall redevelopment site in.
You can't, I mean, I'm frustrated. You need to come to this committee.
And we are, basically, we're kind of saying at this point, this is the plan. So this is obviously, you know, this is an update. This isn't agendized for action or anything. We can certainly, you know, if this is still the desire of this committee to move forward, we have, like I said, we are still working through an agreement. And I also see Mary Ann back there. If you wanted to say anything, feel free.
Yeah,
Mayor.
I want to jump on here. We've been working tirelessly on this development agreement, and I know that when we initially talked about it, we talked about the Baker-Tilly analysis, and so we're working through what that looks like. It's taken a lot longer than we wanted, so that's, you know, we've all been working hard, and when we brought Liz in, she's been working on it too. So again, like, I think this is kind of an interesting opportunity for us to kind of shift the focus to that now empty mall area. Again, that's cleared a lot faster than we anticipated, even when we selected T-Wall for the riverfront. So I think this is a good opportunity. But again, we definitely want to update this committee on where we are. But also we want to kind of take your temperature on this. Is this, you know, that this is something we do need to hear from you on. So I don't know if Mary Ann has anything to add. She is standing.
Good evening. I did want to remind the committee, so the mall right now isn't in a tax increment district because if you recall, if you're going to get ready to demolish all of the improvements on the district from a timing perspective, that's not the time to place property in a district. You want to wait until that value is at its lowest point when you create the district. Or add the property to a district. So right now, a limited portion of the mall area is in a TIF. We find ourselves in kind of an unusual situation. You know, one of the state rules is you can't amend a district to add territory to a district or create a new district unless your increment value is 12% or less than 12% of your total equalized value. So in 2020, we had a revaluation, and you know, from my experience working with the city these many years, that revaluations often send our equalized value kind of into a bit of a roller coaster for a couple of years, because when a revaluation is occurring, we usually are submitting the estimates to the state for our assessed values in the spring of that revaluation year, because the assessor is not done with their work. So the state uses those values to establish equalized values. So the August of 2020 equalized value was using estimates. So then when the Board of Review is done, which was late fall in 2020. Those final numbers are sent to the state, and then when they do the equalized value for the subsequent year, there is a formula for how they manage the corrections, and those corrections are done so that they correct the current year, but they also recover errors from the prior year. So this year, when we received our equalized value in August of 2021, there were corrections of errors in both our total equalized value, and some of those corrections, if you recall, we actually saw a reduction in our equalized value, a 2% reduction in our equalized value. And then our TID districts have in total, a $93 million correction, which is an addition to the district. So between those two, we went from a 10% value of increment in TIDS to 13% value. So we're over our 12% value. And like I said, it's a very unusual situation. We would want to include this property in a TID prior to development occurring, because again, we want to create that TID when the value is at its lowest. So we did reach out to Senator Petrowski to see if there was an exemption because of this unusual situation. And he has, in looking through the statutes, I found other communities that have received similar exemptions. The Village of Weston has received an exemption. The Village of Utzberg, Pleasant Prairie, and the City of Milwaukee have all received exemptions for this similar issue of being over the 12%. So it is possible that the legislature would provide us with an exemption on this. And then in talking to Petrowski, that exemption would likely be available to us by March or April of 2022. And then at that point, once the exemption was in place, we would be able to do our work for the district.
Okay, I have a question on that. So when we talked about this market correction and finance in connection with our budget, even though we had this huge swing this year, it was anticipated, now that we're working with real actual numbers, that next year, that roller coaster will level itself out. And so what we've seen happen this year is not necessarily the case for next year. So given the construction timeline, the actual construction timeline, is it even necessary to get an exemption?
I believe it would be, because they're looking back to the value as of January 1 of 2022. So if construction starts in 2022, that value would be lost, because once you get to a certain point, then it looks forward.
So we would need to go through the TID process early in 2022 prior to the correction happening. Is that?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
That's what we would like to do.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's one other component to take into account.
Okay.
Any follow-up questions? Alder McElhaney? Okay. Alder Keeling?
I have some follow-up comments. One, I think that there needs to be a much greater distinction between private sector and government when we're talking about public-private partnership. So it's not a choose-your-own adventure, that if something goes through the committee, it's approved, it goes through council, it's approved, that audibles aren't pulled in backdoor sessions, that the committee and the body is not involved in. And I think this has been a problem in Wausau for decades, and we need to have a democracy, not an oligarchy, and the only way to make sure that happens is if there is government oversight in public-private relationships. This is not an ATM, and we're not just here to rubber stamp what the downtown culture would like. This is the municipal government, and things need to be nailed down tighter than this, and when there are profound changes, I'd certainly like to hear about it a lot sooner, and I think all of our colleagues on the city council would as well.
Any other questions, comments?
Just a quick
Alder?
comment. I think it's important to recognize that as a developer, Wausau Opportunity Zone is free to select any developer they choose. It just so happens that they have selected the one that we have on deck for this riverfront project. So if it causes that developer a need to reshuffle some of their work, we have a process by which that can happen, but it certainly starts in this committee, and it needs to start very soon. I think we've been clear on that. This is not new, really. I mean, we've seen a similar reprioritization of work when we had Gorman set to finish River Life. And then the Landmark project came along, and so that they could shift focus on River Life, we ended up going with proposer number 2 with their assistance so that River On and Odie and them could finish River Life, and they could move on to focus on Landmark. So it's certainly not the first developer we've had that's had multiple opportunities in Wausau that's caused them to have to reshift their schedule. But given the fact that we had an approved council directive changes to that need to come to us right away. And so, we certainly can't allow T-Wall to shift that work or pull the plug on that project without subsequent voting action. And that's why I was saying somebody from T-Wall needs to be in here soon if this all needs to happen.
Yes, and we had these meetings in the last couple of weeks, and so we are updating as quickly as I think we can. And so, I wanted to let everyone know what was happening, and as the mayor said, take the temperature of the room. We don't have any development agreements worked through in any, for either of those projects. So I know that everyone is kind of chomping at the bit to get that done, and we will bring that to this committee as soon as we can. So, like I said, we just started having these discussions in the last couple of weeks, and so just keeping you informed of everything. And we will, of course, come to you as soon as possible. So,
Any other questions or comments about the T-wall item? No? Okay.
okay, last one is the Neighborhood Investment Program Fund. I just wanted to, again, keep everyone apprised that we are applying for 2 grants for the Neighborhood Investment Program Fund. Basically, it's intended, if people aren't familiar with this program, it is intended to assist local and tribal governments in funding significant transformational projects that help neighborhoods recover from negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and provide long-term benefits to the neighborhood. And these must be high-impact projects that require a significant upfront investment to achieve these long-term goals. So we will be submitting, for sure, 2 applications for this. Every applicant can submit for up to $15 million in funding. We will be submitting for approximately $10.5 million for the pedestrian bridge at the mall redevelopment, and the other will be for $490,000 for the infrastructure under the streets at the mall redevelopment site, as roads cannot be funded, but other infrastructure can be. That does leave us with just over $4 million if we need it to request in another application. Every application must be separate. So we are working with city staff on the on the infrastructure pieces of things, and we are working with also city staff and WAS and Chuck Adorsey on the pedestrian bridge, making sure that we have the budget right for that. So, trying to get some stuff off of TID funding and into other government funding. So any questions about that?
Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ms. Brodick. So in terms of the Neighborhood Investment Program Fund, could you just go into a little more detail about its history and eligible activities and applications, please?
Yes, I have the application and announcement right here. I don't know if I can tell you a lot about the history of this fund, but it is run through the DOA, and they intend to award up to $200 million in grants, basically throughout the U.S. They give examples of different funding that might be eligible for this, including housing, childcare, and then public improvements. So the pedestrian bridge and the streets would definitely come into that. It, of course, like I said, needs to tie into negative economic or health effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think we have a strong argument in saying that the COVID-19 pandemic caused the mall to close at a pace that no one quite expected. And it is in a qualified census tract, which is another component of this grant. So it served, it served a qualified income or a qualified census tract. We had several, retail and service workers that were employed in the mall. So redeveloping this area, it's, with this transformational project, it's a significant upfront one-time cost that we need to complete this. So that's kind of where, we really saw an opportunity to move forward with this, with those particular projects. Mary Ann, I see you have the.
I just didn't hear it said, these are ARPA allocations that the state received. So it's a small window. The application period is a very small window.
Thank you. Yes, applications are due November 11th. The deadline was just extended, and all of the funds have to be expended by December 31st, 2024.
May I, Madam Chair? Thank you. So you said that these could be applied to things like childcare and housing, and we're applying them to a curvy little pedestrian walkway and some monies toward the mall development. Again, I'm familiar with that area because it's in my district, and I can tell you why it would be an opportunity zone, and it's because there's so much poverty and challenges in that census tract. So I would say what I did before when the mall deal came before the council in terms of an opportunity zone, an opportunity for whom precisely. And yes, there have been economic challenges. However, I think when we're looking at using those monies for such a thing, and instead of dire needs like housing and childcare, I think in the future we may want to revisit such decisions. Thank you.
As I just wanted to say, and thank you again, Marianne, for pointing that out, the tight timeline. We have these projects in queue right now, and otherwise they would be funded by other public dollars likely through the city. I know that we had been, if we needed to do something with TID, that would have been an option. So this is a nice way of taking that off. And like I said, they were in queue to basically perform for the city. So we viewed this as an opportunity to move quickly with, we had about a month to put this project together. And unfortunately, for as much as I would love to, because childcare is an infrastructure is a personal passion of mine to figure that out. I unfortunately didn't have anything ready to go and couldn't put something, a multi-million-dollar project together in a month. So we're trying, we're just, I think, doing a good job with the efficiency of what we need to both for the benefit of the taxpayer and the benefit of the community in applying for these grants with these projects.
Alder Rasmussen?
Thank you. Yeah. With the use of these funds, I know with other grant funding that we've either received or applied for, you basically had to have projects that were shovel-ready and ready to go at the time of the award. Was that the same with this?
Thank you very much for bringing that up. Yes, actually, timing is the highest scored component here. Shovel-ready is 30 points. It's 5 points higher than any other scoring criteria on this. So being shovel-ready and having staff capacity to do this are the two, I believe, I don't want to speak incorrectly, but I believe the two highest scored components. Oh, I'm sorry. Staff capacity is not, shovel-ready is. But timing is mentioned and scored twice in this application. Both are the highest components for this.
Well, and I guess the other consideration I have is when we talked about use of ARPA as an offsetting fund source for some of the things in our 2022 budget, one of the things that we had decided to use a little bit of it for was for park improvements. And partially because the pandemic has caused everyone to rethink their not only their work-life balance, but it's also caused them to rethink the value of being outdoors and the ability to be outdoors. And so one of the things that we have coming with this WAS project is a lot of open public space, the bridge included, which connects the riverfront and the walkway there. So, I certainly can see that if you're looking for a shovel-ready infrastructure project that facilitates people being better able to utilize those public spaces, that certainly seems like it fits the bill. Whether we get it or not, we don't know, but, I think it makes sense to apply.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, it's maybe clear to everyone now that I'm pretty passionate about childcare, early childhood education. And while the city doesn't have shovel-ready projects when it comes to childcare and daycare, there are other organizations around our community that do have shovel-ready projects, and they are also applying for these grants. I know that because I've talked to them about it. So I think that there are opportunities, and I think the other thing is it's new for us as government to be thinking about childcare. when it comes to like a city, maybe for employees, right? But that is something that I've been discussing with the county, maybe for employees, again, like preliminarily. So we don't have anything really ready to go, but it is top of mind for me. Maybe it's because of my age and all of my friends have children that need daycare and it's super expensive. But I agree, like it's really important, and I think we can support funds like this being used towards projects in our community, in addition to stuff that we're applying for.
Any other questions or comments? All right, any other comments you would like to make?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, so item number 6 on the agenda is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Alder Killian, a second. Alder Rasmussen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.